all also number conscious so to Dorji Nazuko or changing to undergo some more of it so to jar
Okay, the most venerable Geshe Rinpoche is the advising us to first of all reflect on His Holiness the Dalai Lama, visualize His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and all the Buddhist Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, and let us pray for all the dear Mother Sentient beings. I go for refuge until enlightenment to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings.
oh yeah laureate ni chimbo ne tetetune mayin barasa ta konde sheba teter mayin na ya nya goli sa ta dinone shonto so ma choshana manchiwa mendo oh yeah je tsede kachuto kachune oh Bombala soba rongi yalato tu tate chebe ribi rangi ne me partela babi sombe tola trene watati po jon chede no lo teba je to chai che to tamba koro to ne yalato to teba je trene and tu jaro di shi oli den trene Bombala soba, Cheto, Jumbala soba, Rongi Yala, going Tebana, Teta, going Teta, Mani, Pana, Bombala, Mandu, Go, Nyam the Niver, Zemba, the Nipat and the Jindayong, Sir Nipan, the Nipan, Tine, Tijiko, Chunke Lions, Tila, Chunke Lion, Tetar, Tena, Tebana, Chunke, Mended, Gold, the River, Euros. Teach Chunke, Chunke, Mandu, Chunke, Money, Banas. Bombala soba. Ani soba. Meto nyade Sujiki nishi nyone. Das meto nyamketeo siyana ndeye me lamjema. Me nyamketeo. Nyamde sambi yobayo Mayimba Mebayo May Zawa Stagi Tanizake Yore Sata Jenke Moya Ani Ripat Starnos, Ripat Starnore, Rubayon Tamares, Tanori, Neba, Chinchilla lot, Chinchilla, Niba Chinchilla Chung, Niba Chinchilla lot, Chumba la, Tawa Niba, Joban, the Lil Hashur, the Tawas nearly years, and Kayo me, Nyakayo me, Tayoba my, Meba my, said Dania, what the Tawa Yapania years, and then Jonky your ass.
Page 39. This is spelled out eloquently by Tsongkhapa in his great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, where he says, failing to reach such knowledge of both appearances and emptiness, some mistake the meaning of statements in certain authoritative texts that demonstrate the absence of inherent existence via rational analysis of whether pots and such are one with or different from their parts, analyzing whether something such as a pot is any of its parts, such as its lip or neck. They do not find it to be any of those. This leads them to a sense of certainty that there is no pot here. Then applying the same analysis to the analyzer, they become certain that there is also no analyzer here. They then wonder, if the analyzer is not to be found, then who is that knows that pots and such do not exist? So they say, things are neither existent nor non-existent. If the false certainty brought on by this sort of counterfeit reasoning were considered a case of finding the Madhyamaka view, then gaining that view would seem to be the easiest thing in the world. This is the wrong understanding of, this is not the correct understanding of emptiness.
Oh yeah, then the Lori Chuan only Jones. Anibana, Marat Shebi, Gaza, Celeber Mashi, on the Tulijaron, Gaza Celeber, Hamakon, Gaza Celeber Mazi. Never yearla repeat the Jabati, Servana, Sivazia, the social Chashi Serjayat, Matoshi, she serves in the Tumble Tonga. Servana, yearla, the money, the Mandu Baton, Corinja, Jeta, Chashi Sevo to Colotava. Mebarendo, Longola Mebarendo, the Mandico Yanda, Musi, Dine, the easy cola carasata, Dine Stinke Danaya, Tastinke Koro, Dinner Mumbo, Tony, man, Dinner Tone, Dinner Tone, Janke, Mane, Ninke, Mebar. Koyo, Ninkayo, Mepi, Kolayo, Deme, Niba, Chasame, but Sony, and Noah Pempo, Noah, Prepara to Pempo to Soas. Noah, Chayo, Longe, Yome Towns. Tani Shanka Tani Yoras, Tani Mebar, Ani Mebado, you met a man, Roshiki, or Mebar Sony, no one paper to show you, no one Charad, Roshi Mebar, Roshiki Traba Messi at the door. Dennis Cheton Messi at the Kevachi Mator. You made Machi Pala, Steny, Joey, oh, Tindawa, Tomba, Tindra, Tomba, Tindraka Tombata, Lila, Tendre Sugar, Detect Tender Sugar, Tendre Mapa Social, Tendre Sugar. Tomba Yimbi, Yela, then she be Tomba Yela. The Cheston is and Tonga Contour much sono Yola, the Cheston race. Da, that Tinola, the Gaza leper Mumas and Bass, tea on the table.
Page 40. The second paragraph reads, maybe the above point comes across in more succinctly in the following quote from Lama Tsongkhapa's short treatise on the stages of the path of enlightenment. Here, the one really need to keep in mind is, as indicated here, that if one fails to identify the object of negation well, then these problems will happen. Where it reads, when without correctly ascertaining the object of negation, as mentioned earlier, you carry out a reasoned analysis by disassembling the object, simply dissecting the object or disassembling the object. You first think it is not there, because when you unassemble the parts, then the object as the whole disappears. Then you think that it is not there. Then, as you also see the analyzer, when the same analysis is conducted to the person who is doing this, the dissection or unassembling, then as you also see the analyzer yourself, in that same way that you dissect yourself into the parts, again this self disappears. There is no one even to ascertain that non-existence. So then one thinks that even the person who ascertains this emptiness of the object is nowhere to be found. So with no way to determine what something is or is not. So is and is not both seem to be rejected in your mind. It begins to seem that what appears has become vague and indistinct, or what appears as something like nothing to really hold on to, as something like the illusory, vague and indistinct meaning, something illusory. This comes about based upon reason refuting everything without distinguishing inherent existence and its absence from mere existence and its absence, meaning failing to make a distinction between what exists and what inherently exists, and the absence of things and the absence of inherent existence. When one does not know how to distinguish the two, then these conclusions can be drawn. Thus, this sort of emptiness is an emptiness that destroys dependent arising. This is what Rinpoche said, that this kind of emptiness is referred to as nihilistic emptiness. It's all because of failing to identify the object negation well, object negation of emptiness well. The text continues reading. Therefore, illusoriness, as we use the term, definitely does not refer to the arising of this, let's say, the vague or the illusory aspect on the basis of simply rejecting existence. The indistinct appearance brought on by this kind of realization, and this is where we are. This is considered the conclusion that one can come to is considered as very easy to get to, and this is not the real emptiness.
bamboo, prepare, or tonic bamboo, the chava, so go out and make it take couple of miles, this second total. The Stony Jumba Yima Jiba Hako is a contour of the Stony. Go out and make it, Kasang Omata Carreras and make it. Take a women Chuntala Soba Mushi, the Uma Chuntala Mubayo, Gabayo, Tony Sayatala Gabayo, Mubayo, Yona, Dita Tindrik Chu, Niva Mushi, Roger maybe Tonton. Chu Tari to Tubat Tamshila Wounds Roger Meba got any Chu shooting or tending that you call the territory corner ya Tikala social Tonya Mebayu. The soul will have it in a wall younger Kasa Kawa Wounds. She Chava Tokawa Mechi, Takaba Maras, Tinda Tilas, Umi Trumta, Mishi, Roget, maybe Tari Taturi, Rila, Tamchila, Yomi.
Page 41, the second paragraph reads, likewise in both the short and the great treatises on the stages of the path of enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, one finds the same point emphasized with additional light shed on the process of finding the view correctly when they say, therefore, upon recent analysis, this pertains to those people who do not have the vast, extensive learning on emptiness, just and failing to identify the object negation incorrectly, correctly. So this is with reference to them. Therefore, upon recent analysis, one concludes. So these people, they conclude, phenomena such as persons and so forth lack even the slightest instance of existence on those objects imagined to be existing through their essence. On that basis, it is not difficult simply to have these appearances seem vague and indistinct, as said earlier. And so where through this end up failing to identify the object negation well, and then just the splitting the object into its parts, and then the object disappears. And then on that basis, later on, when you look at the object, sometimes you may get a feeling as though like they are like illusory, or they are vague and indistinct. This is something very easy for anybody to get to, even though you may not be having any exposure to the real understanding of emptiness. This can happen to anybody very easily. This is what Kondar Rinpoche very clearly indicated. The text continues. That sort of experience comes to everyone who aspires to an understanding of Madhyamika tenets and hears a little of the teaching that shows how things like inherent nature. So somebody who is inclined towards the Madhyamika philosophy and who has learned a little bit about the emptiness, and on that basis they conduct this analysis. This experience is bound to happen, which is not that difficult. This is indeed very easy.
Roger me patila, Gonzala Soba, they do. Gonzala Soba, Tinian, George, Tinian, Lee, Soba Bon, Boton, Jibut, Yomabu, Joshiba, and Niba, Tenny, and John things, Dinners, Jotabi, when you told the some touch of the service. What the Casamama to Roger Trava Parka with Tony Limdi La Subatene Jatonketa, Casamama the Carignan de Casa. Only for me, only Oma estaba siendo ya cabal. O ta casa mamá to estaba llena, o tenía limne tata le ya tava. Iba más ya tava yongore. Esta tenía ya matonta. Bari tenía ma goya to tenía le tu de o estaba mañana casa. O estaba llena tenía gongore.
Continue reading from page 42, at the first paragraph in the middle. It reads, still, it is difficult to develop certainty about both. Okay. What truly is difficult is to develop certainty about both the complete refutation of the nature of existence from their own essence and the presentation of those persons who lack intrinsic nature as accumulators of karma, experience of the effects of karma, and so forth. It scarcely happens that someone combines the capacities to possess both. So it is exceedingly difficult to find the Madhyamik view. And what truly is difficult is that failing to understand the object of negation well, then you unassemble things, the parts, into pieces, and you see that the object disappears. So on that basis, this is something which is not difficult to understand, and on that basis you may also get some experience of something like hazy or the indistinct or like some form of illusory the thoughts, the perceptions can happen. That is easy. What is difficult is to see to the two things coming together, that is rejecting inherent existence, at the same time by the virtue of rejecting inherent existence, one gets a deep conviction in the efficacy of law of karma, efficacy of rebirth. This combination is extremely difficult to get to, and therefore the view of the middle way is said to be very difficult to get to.
The Donna sent it in the Kokawa in the Savage in Tonsel, Tobala, Tonsel in the Tone, Lorit Nichomole, Teta Yamba, Jean Tedden is a Taka, Jean Tedden is a turn is switching to us, what then turn, the Hamagol, delicate to turn. Jibanes, then let Hasho, no more, or Tinny to Hako go. Lorich de Choano, Smashy be Gaja, leper machine, Sunday was at. Also, Mama, Chede, Karel, Chelebar Woman, Jibani, and Jibani, standard new ship by the Cheton Dindo, standard new ship with Cheton, yes, Ishi is Somba, Sola, Stana, the Solar Star, Tachetona, Da. Karar yakin chur keton yung chede no lo keton ke jamba to cheto pomba to karar keton te mandrin le yo tenin niba riba number ke riba number ke ba na kozala so ba dong ke we te ba Yes, 좀 도착 조세 좀 먼저 냠네 언제 예스텐데 매바데 코로카네 코로 예스텐데 로지기 쳐봐서야 코로케 켄로 코로케 차시 도도 네 예스텐이 요면 어떨래서 고게 맨로 소소진도
Page 42, the last paragraph. As to what to make of these statements from short and great treatises on the stages of the path of enlightenment, it is very difficult to fathom fully. However, I can only think of the following. Judging from the lines, failing to reach such knowledge of both appearances and emptiness, some mistake the meaning of statements in certain authoritative texts that demonstrate the absence of intrinsic existence via rational analysis of whether pots and such are one with or different from their parts, and the lines that further say, then gaining that view would seem to be the easiest thing in the world. What we need to keep in mind is, one is that where does the problem lie? One is failing to identify the object negation well. Then number two, as very clearly indicated, that this is the easiest thing that anybody can get to. This one thing that we need to keep in mind. And the third one is because that the identification of the object negation is wrong, naturally the analysis that one undertakes to reject the intrinsic existence also goes wrong. So these are three things where we need to keep in mind, particularly reading these the very standard texts. And then it continues, both of which appear in the great treatise on the stages of the path of enlightenment, and the lines, when without correctly ascertaining the object negation, as mentioned earlier, you carry out a reasoned analysis by disassembling the object. You first think it is not there, as stated in the short treatises on the stages of the path of enlightenment, and then looking at the common statement that appears in both of these treatises. Therefore, upon reasoned analysis, one concludes phenomena such as persons and so forth lack even the slightest instance of existence on those objects imagined to be existing through their essence. Here, that for the objects, what exists, what doesn't exist, this distinction has to be made. Same for the vase, what exists, that the vase exists, and then the vase existence, the true existence of the vase is non-existent. So this distinction has to be made, and in our perception, these two appear invariably. These two appear as just mixed up, as the same. But we require the skill to make the distinction between these two things. That the vase exists, but the inherent existence of the vase does not exist. This distinction is so important to be made. For example, I personally remember that the many years ago, in the slaughterhouse of the animals, the butchers, what they do is that they have all these sheep, and from these sheep, those which are to be butchered the next day, they will mark them. It's not that they're going to they kill all the animals, only few selected for the next day, and that they mark in order not to mix up what is to be butchered, what not. So this distinction these pujas they make. Likewise, in our analysis of emptiness, we have to make the distinction what is not to be rejected and what is to be rejected.